Okay, hi everyone. This is the instructions for the annotated bibliography. What an annotated bibliography is, how to read your sources for the purpose of creating an annotated bibliography. So take a look at this, and while you are watching, have a couple things open. So let me share my screen with you. And first thing is to have your agenda, to have your agenda open, have the annotated bibliography document, which is now in your drive, open, and then have the agenda open because you're going to click on this link, and this is going to bring you to this presentation, which is also posted for you, but I like to link things in 5 different places. And this is the main thing that we're going to go over today is what annotated bibliographies are, the purpose of them, how to create one, kind of everything of that nature. Okay, so let's go through this together. So the goal of an annotated bibliography is, well, a big thing for high school is just understanding MLA format, Modern Language Association format. I think I've shared this with you already this year that frustratingly for some people, when you get to college, you're exposed to, I think I used 4 different formats when I was in college, and that was a long time ago. But they all work relatively the same way. It's just about that consistency. It's about citing things appropriately. MLA is used by far more than other ones. So that's a big thing. So we want you to be a little bit more comfortable with MLA formatting. The big thing is we want you to be able to evaluate your sources. So evaluate them for credibility, for relevance, for utility. That means how well to use them. The reason why that's so important is because we want you, this is ambrosia, because we want you to be able to do that quickly when you get to college. I won't lie, you probably aren't going to write a lot of formal annotated bibliographies after high school, but the point of doing them is that so that you know mentally how to go through your sources and really figure out whether they're good sources or not. We're exposing you to more kind of academic sources right now, such as the journals and things like that. But even some of those are better than others. We want you to be able to do that. And lastly, we want these sources should provide you with concrete and illustrative evidence that will reinforce the major supporting arguments necessary to validate your research paper's thesis. So again, you need to be really familiar with your sources that you're using. You shouldn't just be like, especially when it comes to the written portion of the project, you shouldn't just be scanning your sources for buzzwords and then cutting and pasting that piece of evidence. Like, you need to understand your evidence, and that takes time to do. Okay, so the directions. You're going to, as you get through your research, you're going to record each source in proper MLA format. There's a lot of different ways to do that. That is at the top of this page right here. This tells you how to go through and find your citation, okay, for any source that you could possibly be using. And you're accurately and succinctly, that means like quickly and accurately evaluating the strengths and weaknesses and relevance of each source, okay? Down here in red, this is an important note, especially as you progress with research here at Homestead. You do formal research projects sophomore, junior, and senior year. The expectation is that you are doing new research every year, just so you know, okay? So you're not going to replicate this year's project next year, because next year you're focusing on a United Statesian issue. So we want to make sure that you are practicing this with multiple sources and not just doing the same stuff senior year that you were when you were, you know, like a lame sophomore. I mean, a sophomore, right? That wouldn't be good. Okay. Okay, so the content for each entry, okay, so each one of those color-coded sections I have on that document, you're going to cite each source for its proper MLA format, just as it would appear on a final draft of a works cited or a bibliography page of a research project. You will have a section of your project that will be your works cited page. Works cited, cited works. So everything that you are going to use for your project, you have to cite that source. Maybe that's the 10 sources that you submitted for me. Maybe it's additional sources. You don't have to use all of those 10 sources, just so you know. But that's where you're just going to use everything. Oftentimes I'll see up to 25 different sources that people are using, okay? That includes graphs and infographics and really kind of everything like that. Below each source, again, going back to that document that you have in front of you, you're gonna address 3 different things. A summary, strengths and the weaknesses, and relevance, and that's what this presentation is I'm going to go through all of them, okay? One more time for proper MLA formatting, we have 2 sources here for you, one from Purdue University, one from Trinity College. All of these, I mean, literally tell you what to do when it comes to formatting, okay? But let's go through those 3 paragraphs you're gonna write for each source. Now, this is a lot of information, so definitely like pause where you need to, read this at your own pace, whatever you need to do. This is a lot. I mean, we would take like a whole week to go through this usually, but we gotta, we're doing what we have to do. Okay. First paragraph is your summary paragraph. At the very least, you need to be able to describe the information that is in the source that you're choosing to use for this project, okay? There's lots of different ways to write a summary paragraph. I have down here for you a guideline of what to do, okay? So if you have no idea what to do, then just do what I've written down here and you'll be just fine. In summary paragraph, you do not use personal pronouns. No I's, no my's, no I thinks, no nothing like that, okay? Well, let's go through this together here for the summary paragraph. Your first sentence is, and this is all ish, right? It's not like it's an exact sentence or whatever like that. But name of the author, of course, one part of the thing that adds to credibility is who is this author, right? So if you're able to research their background, their position, their qualifications, where did they get their education, what are they a professor of, or what is their professional role these days? The genre and the title of the work, so genre, what kind of source are you using? Is this an interview? Is this a news source? Is this an academic journal, a documentary, blah, blah, blah. A rhetorically accurate verb, okay? So assert, argue, suggest, et cetera, and that clause containing the major assertion of the source. So basically you're just telling me who wrote this, where it came from, what that author is trying to do with this information. Moving on to the second sentence is explanation of how the author develops and or supports the thesis, usually in chronological order. So how is that author going through, or how did they get to the point where, you know, they're presenting what it is that they're presenting? Was this somebody that went out to Syria and has firsthand account of what's going on, et cetera, et cetera? What is the basis for the research or the data reported? What is the type of information used, the methodology? How was the information gathered? Problem statements, limitations. Again, this is just a summary. So if you can tell automatically that, you know, this is a project on Muslim discrimination, but it's only focusing on one, you know, majority Muslim country, then that's a limitation. That means it's missing something. What is the scope of the documentation? Look at the different information, writers cited, dates, formats, quality, as well as quantity, everything like that. Does the piece include any significant information? So attachments, appendices, statistics, that's a quantifiable data, right? What kind of information is included like that? Sentence 3, a statement about the author's apparent purpose. Like, what is the purpose of this author writing what it is that they are doing, followed by some kind of like in order phrase. The author writes this in order to what, right? What is it that the author wants us to change about our mindset? Like if you found some incredible piece on fracking in the South China Sea, and you discover that the author works for Shell Petroleum Company or British Petroleum Company, obviously the purpose of that source is going to be different than somebody who maybe works for an environmental agency. So looking at things like that. And lastly, finish up the summary paragraph by talking about just a description of the intended audience. Who was this written for? Again, what is the intended relationship between the author and the audience? You're finding through your sources that some of these sources are just meant to inform. Those are like the news articles, right? You have to think about, remember that media bias chart. You have to think about what kind of news source that is and who it's trying to reach and things like that. Or is it an academic piece? Is it some really, I don't know, obscure academic journal that's really kind of only intended for other people in that professional community? Think about that, okay? Moving on to strengths and weaknesses. This is going to be 2 slides, just so you know. Excuse me. So in this paragraph, and this is going to be the beefiest paragraph probably, but you're essentially critiquing the sources that you've found, okay? We are making you do this in long form, which means we're making you write this out for 3-ish years here in high school, so that when you get to higher level research later on, you can quickly figure out, oh, this source is great, I absolutely have to use this, or oh, this source is crap, I don't want to use this. That's why we're making you do this, okay? So, and it's not enough to do it one time, so we do make you do it a couple times on purpose. Okay, so you absolutely do not have to answer all of the questions on the next 2 slides here. These are just some ideas that you may consider. Like there's a bunch of different options for you to use here. Again, in the strengths weaknesses paragraph, you're not using personal pronoun. Okay, so you want to critique the content. Like what is it, what specific content makes this source strong or weak? Why? What aspects of the subject are emphasized? Is there a particular point of view that's being presented? Is there a benefit or a detriment to this research being done? What conclusions are being drawn? What issues are raised? Big one right here, I do want to point out kind of midway through, does the author present any biases or fallacies in their arguments or conclusions? That's a major, major thing that we're seeing in the world today. Like, oh yeah, there's some really, really amazing piece being written about famine in India, but it's funded by the Indian government who, I don't know, doesn't want to make themselves look bad. No government ever does, right? So all kinds of stuff like that. That's a big deal for any piece. How effectively is the information presented? Does the author leave you feeling confused? You're like, I didn't understand any of this. Are there any gaps or holes in the research? Is this work primary research or is it secondary research? Like, is it, somebody who is experiencing this issue? That's a primary source, right? Or is it, and this is what usually happens, is it somebody going out and reporting on what is happening to others? That is actually secondary research, okay? Is that an advantage or disadvantage? How does this source compare to other sources that you are seeing? Kind of everything like that. Hey, a big... never mind, I'm gonna move on. Credibility. Is the content true? Is the content real? Is it objective? Okay. All of those things are major. Is there anything that's lacking? Does the author leave the reader with questions about what is not stated? Like if you're reading this as respectfully a 16-year-old and you're like, but what about like this giant elephant sitting in this room over here? That means there's a hole in their research, in their writing that they have not presented for you. If information about the author, the sponsor, the publisher was difficult to find or limited. So if you do take that, and you should, if you do take that extra measure to research an author, to research an organization, is it easily found? Or is it some shadow organization that doesn't want you to know that it's funded by, you know, oil tycoons in Bahrain or something like that. Like that is important for you to, for us to be able to go through it and figure out where this information is coming from. That's the problem with the world today, is nobody knows where anything is coming from. Authority, should the reader trust the creator of the source? Is this like an actual credible, like, you know, using ethos and logos, is this like an actual authority on this subject, or is this just somebody with an opinion? You are finding that opinion pieces are not great for research, only because they're just extremely biased. And I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way, but it's just hard to use that. So think about authority. Talked about this, the author's background, like do they have any, you know, special experience or expertise? Like for right now, everybody is suddenly an expert on medicine, because obviously the medical world is affecting the entire globe right now. And it's just like, no, we need to listen to people that, you know, have actual educated backgrounds and stuff like that. And again, the organization, the publisher or the sponsor of that piece, and then anything that's kind of extra. Is there anything unique about this source that makes it particularly valuable? Are there any other qualities of the source, like the style, the organization, the graphics, which affect its usefulness? That is a big thing. You're seeing also as well that some sources of yours are just strict text from top of the page to bottom of the page for 10 pages. And I don't know about you, but that's really difficult for me to read. Or is it more textbook style, like your textbooks, the good ones anyway? Are there any? No. Is the information divided easily? Are there graphics to support what it is that you're showing? Kind of everything like that. Hey, some things to avoid. So strengths and weaknesses, obviously the big one, but there are some things that you shouldn't necessarily be saying are strengths or weaknesses. Okay, so some things that never affect a source's strengths or weaknesses, like easy or difficult vocabulary. Oh, these were big words that were hard to read. That's not something that makes a source good or bad. I love you, but that is what makes a source like good, is that, you know, it uses like good, strong, you know, scientific, technical vocabulary, or that a source is dry or boring. That might be a personal critique that you might have. But remember, your job here is you are critiquing these sources for their validity and how useful they are to kind of research in general, not your own personal preference, okay? And then you also want to avoid just more summary. You already did that in the previous paragraph, okay? Paragraph 2 is all about why this source may or may not be useful to research in general. That's the whole purpose of the second paragraph, okay? Moving right along, third paragraph, all this paragraph is relevant, or its connection to your own personal research topic that you've chosen. This is the only paragraph where you can use personal pronoun just a little bit, just like salt, right? But this is where you're describing how specific elements from this source are going to be important in explicating a research topic, okay? So what is it specifically about this source that makes it useful for your project there? We're going to go back and we're going to add to these things as we're moving along with the annotated bibliography process, just so you know. Remember, we're just in the kind of rough draft outline phase. Almost done, you're doing wonderful. Here are some formatting and style mechanics things. So here's how these things are written. This is going to be more information for the final draft, but of course always wanting to provide you with stuff that's useful now. Annotated bibliographies are double space. Everything is left justified. The title, which is shockingly annotated bibliography, is the only thing that's centered. You are alphabetizing your sources by their last name or the first word, okay? Because some of you are using sources that do come from organizations or websites that don't necessarily have an author. Okay, so then you take out words like the or an or something like that, and then you alphabetize it by the title of the work itself. You are going to provide a hanging indent. So when you type up your citation, the first line is left aligned. It's all the way over on the left. Every subsequent line needs to be indented. That's on the example that you have, okay? Headings and paragraphs indented so that the first line of every citation is the only text that is flush left. Look at the examples that you've been provided on the research website, okay? looking at titles of things. Make sure you know when to italicize and when to use quotes, right? Um, titles of books, TV shows, plays, journals, all of those are italicized, whereas kind of everything else is put in quotation. So make sure you know when and where to do that. You're going to bold the entries and headings of the paragraphs. You don't really have a whole lot of choice when headings. It's going to be like summary, strength, weaknesses, connections, like that. You're just going to bold it. You're not skipping lines. You'll skip a line between to the next entry, right? But you're not skipping lines between paragraphs. And this is a formal document, so it does need to sound like, you know, big kid writing, and make sure that things are, you know, spelled correctly and words are capitalized. The final draft is going to be submitted to turnitin.com, just so you know. Okay. As always, if you have questions, holler at me. And we'll figure out what to do. I'll stop my sharing. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're working on. That's how to do the annotated bibliography. Then now you're going to go back to that annotated bibliography outline document that should be in front of you. And this is the document that's going to be due on Tuesday the 28th, I do believe, by 11 p.m. But we're going to also talk about that when we see each other after spring break. Okay. Love you so much. I know that was a lot. Just go back one paragraph at a time so you really understand the purpose and the content of each paragraph. Look at the examples that I have posted for you on the research website, okay, like our World Lit website, just so you can take a look at some final samples. Those samples are going to be slightly different than what we're asking you to do, but the main idea is still there, okay? Love you so much. Take your time. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.